It was 10 circle text C on Christmas Eve, a night that demanded warmth and sanctuary, but which my father, Richard Harrison, transformed into a stark theater of cruelty. Richard, a man whose entire existence was predicated on maintaining absolute control, had exiled me from our lavish Aspen estate. My supposed transgression, a mild, factual critique of his prized pecan pie crust, was merely the flimsy pretext for an act born of pathological narcissism. I was left stranded, shivering in the brutal, pristine snow, my gaze fixed on the warm, illuminated windows. I watched the scene of manufactured domestic perfection inside, highlighted by the firelight that danced across the triumphant faces of my stepmother, Charlotte, and my stepsister, Tiffany. Tiffany, the heir apparent, was currently tearing through the wrapping of a custom-built, high-performance gaming PC, the very piece of technology that had been explicitly promised to me before the spectacular collapse of my own career. The passing of an hour stretched into an agonizing eternity. The biting cold had long since surpassed simple pain, descending into a deep, dangerous numbness that promised a quiet, unwelcome surrender. Just as that cold began to feel definitive, a low, powerful, resonant engine note sliced through the stillness. A black extended wheelbase Rolls-Royce Phantom, its surfaces catching the minimal ambient light, glided silently to a halt near the curb of the mansion. My grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, emerged from the vehicle. The undisputed matriarch, the very definition of power cloaked in uncompromising elegance. Her sharp glacial eyes instantly registered my huddled, frost-bitten state. Her gaze flicked once to the warm, oblivious glow of the mansion's windows, and then she spoke, her voice a low, utterly resolute command. Execute. The rear doors of the Phantom opened with a controlled hydraulic sigh. Two men in dark, expensive, perfectly tailored wool suits moved with the terrifying, economical precision of a professional extraction team. They bypassed the grand front door, crossed the frozen lawn with practiced, silent steps, flanked me, and lifted me from the snowdrift. I was handled not with tenderness, but with the necessary urgency reserved for retrieving a high-value asset from a compromised zone. My body was too stiff, too deeply chilled to offer resistance. In 3 decisive steps, I was deposited onto the plush, heated leather of the back seat. The door sealed shut with a soft, final thud, instantly locking out the merciless wind, the biting cold, and the sight of Tiffany's delighted, avaricious face reflected in the screen of my salvaged professional hardware. The atmosphere inside the car was one of absolute silence and profound insulation. The air was meticulously regulated, warm, and carried the rich, clean scent of fine leather and Eleanor's complex, expensive perfume. Across from me sat the woman who, over decades, had built the Sterling Empire and whose will dictated the financial reality of everyone present. I hadn't seen her since the catastrophic failure of my tech company, Phoenix Labs. She offered no gasp, no tears, no superficial inquiry into my well-being. Eleanor considered such emotional displays to be critical operational failures. Her silver-white hair was sculpted into an unforgiving chignon, and she was draped in a vicuña coat that whispered of uncompromising generational wealth, a garment that alone held more intrinsic value than my entire defunct company's assets. She reached to the seat beside her, picked up a heavy charcoal-gray cashmere trench coat, and simply tossed it over my shivering body. It landed on me with a comforting weight, feeling less like fabric and more like a protective layer of armor. "Put your arms through, Vivian," she commanded, her voice low, steady, and entirely devoid of conventional pity. Hypothermia is an amateur's mistake, a vulgar way to expire in such proximity to wealth. I fumbled with the sleeves, my jaw chattering so violently I worried about physical damage. As the warmth of the cashmere began to penetrate my frozen extremities, the sensation was 1,000 simultaneous pinpricks of pain, the signal of blood circulation painfully resuming. I looked out the tinted bulletproof window. Through the glass, I could clearly see the silhouette of my father, Richard, standing like a sovereign in the living room, a snifter of decades-old scotch raised high. He appeared completely secure in his position, utterly unaware that his stronghold was, at that very moment, under silent, overwhelming attack. I managed, my voice a croaking, painful sound of broken submission. I just told him the pecan pie was slightly dry. That's all I said. Eleanor's gaze remained fixed on the oblivious house. You think this is about pastry, Vivian? You genuinely believe you are sitting here, minutes from organ failure, over a flaw in a dessert? You fatally misunderstand your opponent. She finally turned her intense gaze to me, her eyes dark, penetrating, and entirely analytical. He did not lock you out because you were disrespectful. He locked you out because he felt diminutive. Observe him. Her gesture toward Richard in the window was one of pure, sophisticated contempt. That is a man who operates with a dangerously brittle ego. A fundamentally weak man, a narcissist, can only achieve a sense of potency when he is actively inflicting verifiable suffering. He requires a victim, a subordinate, a human barometer to measure his pathetic self-worth. Tonight, your desperate shivering in the snow served as his critical proof of life. It is not punishment, Vivian. It is his necessary narcissistic fuel. The analysis was chilling, precise, and utterly destructive to my self-blame. The words struck me with a truth colder than the snow outside. For months, I had been drowning in the toxic belief that I was the defect, that my professional failure had stripped me of my right to belong. I had convinced myself that absolute subservience would earn me a reprieve. Eleanor, in 3 sentences, had obliterated that narrative. I was not a bad daughter. I was simply an essential energy source for a predator. He thinks he's teaching me a lesson, I whispered, the realization solidifying into a terrible clarity. He is, Eleanor replied, reaching for the intercom panel on the console. But he is about to discover that he is not the sole instructor in this family. Driver, execute isolation protocol. Cut the power to the main residence. Confirm the auxiliary generator circuit remains isolated. I watched, mesmerized, as the brilliant, defiant lights of the Harrison mansion flickered, sputtered, and plunged into total darkness. The enormous, professionally decorated Christmas tree went instantly black. My father's silhouette, mid-gesture, was frozen in the sudden gloom. Inside the silent car, the only light was the cool blue glow of the digital dashboard on Eleanor's face. She was not smiling. This was not about revenge. This was about necessary corporate restructuring. Complete the thaw, she instructed, leaning back into the luxurious seat. We will observe the tactical effect. I want him to see the car. I want him to know that the checkmate notification has been delivered before he can even locate the pawn he thought he was playing with. I sat in the profound quiet, the heavy cashmere finally expelling the deep-seated cold. I watched the darkened house. Without the theatrical lighting, the grand estate looked fragile, exposed. Less a fortress of wealth, more a hollow facade. The question of my return was agonizingly simple: financial ruin. My algorithm-based startup had been ahead of its time, but I had exhausted the runway. Bankruptcy loomed, and Richard, who controlled the necessary familial trusts, held the literal key to my survival. The last 3 months were defined by the subscription fee of my dignity. Silence when Charlotte referred to Phoenix Labs as a quaint little flop. Deference when Richard lectured me on real business principles while living off his mother's trusts. And compliance when Tiffany treated me like an unpaid servant. My hands, though still flushed, had stopped shaking. I genuinely didn't believe he would resort to this, I said quietly. I thought it was just the usual escalation of threats. Eleanor did not take her eyes off the house. That is the very structure of the trap, Vivian. The systemic normalization of the abusive act. It never begins with sub-zero exile. It begins with the microaggressions, the public slights, the deliberate interruptions, the casual erasure of your value. He lowers the emotional temperature 1 degree at a time, until you are so perfectly conditioned that you don't even perceive the danger until your will to resist is gone. She spoke the truth with terrifying clinical accuracy. I had convinced myself that enduring the insults was resilience. Now I saw it was profound, self-destructive conditioning. I conditioned myself to accept the fragments, I admitted, the shame a painful heat. I thought if I was quiet enough, they'd simply forgive me for failing. You did not fail, Vivian, Eleanor declared, her voice sharp and final. You attempted an extraordinary entrepreneurial feat. They, she gestured toward the darkened windows, have only ever consumed and borrowed, and the parasite, more than any other creature, harbors a fierce, protective hatred for the host that finally attempts to break its control. She tapped the console screen. A live feed from the internal security cameras appeared. The house was now illuminated solely by the flickering fireplace and the yellow glow of emergency battery lanterns. The atmosphere had soured from festive annoyance to seething, entitled chaos. Charlotte was dramatically gesturing toward the black windows. Then I saw Tiffany. She was still on the sofa, clutching the silver-wrapped package. My package. The high-performance laptop containing the entire protected code base of my intellectual property. She opened it, and the screen flashed to life. Even in the grainy feed, I saw the triumphant, covetous smile. Richard beside her poured another drink, nodding his tacit approval. He was not concerned about his daughter freezing. He was sanctioning the looting of her last assets. She's taking my laptop, I said, my voice hollow. That is my entire life's work. She is taking it because in their operational model, you are already professionally and personally nullified, Eleanor stated. Deleted. Charlotte is likely convincing her right now that your 47 minutes of hypothermia was nothing more than a childish, self-inflicted performance staged to manipulate them. He thinks the darkness is just a power outage. I observed, the venom finally starting to return to my veins. He thinks he is the only one who can turn the lights off. He is about to discover, Eleanor corrected, picking up the sleek black satellite phone, that he possesses absolutely no control over the master switch. She spoke a single command. Execute Phase 2. Enter the premises. The doors of the Rolls-Royce locked with a heavy thud. Outside, the two security agents began their calculated, purposeful walk toward the front door. "Ready, Vivian?" Eleanor asked, her gaze challenging me. "I have nothing," I said, my hands clutching the borrowed cashmere. "No keys, no money, no leverage. They have everything of mine." Eleanor gave me a thin, terrifying smile. "You have the deed, Vivian. You just haven't grasped the implications of the ownership yet. Let's go introduce your father to his new landlord." The grand front door did not open conventionally. It unlocked with a definitive, mechanical click. Eleanor didn't knock. She walked through the entrance as if the security system recognized and submitted to its true master. The blizzard rushed in behind her, a vortex of wind and snow instantly chilling the marble foyer. I followed 2 steps behind, flanked by the security detail. I felt like a silent, implacable avenger returning to settle an ancient score. My body was still warming, but my mind was operating with brutal, crystalline clarity. The living room froze. Richard mid-laugh, glass raised. Charlotte examining a diamond cuff. Tiffany engrossed in my screen. "Mother!" Richard's voice cracked, the scotch sloshing over the rim of the glass. He blinked rapidly, desperately trying to reassemble his fractured reality. We didn't expect you. The roads... How did you get here?" Eleanor ignored him. She walked deliberately to the center of the room, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a judge's gavel. She did not remove her coat. She examined the gaudy holiday display and the pile of extravagant gifts with the detached precision of a toxicologist. "Silence the noise," she commanded. It was an order. Tiffany frantically scrambled for the remote. The Christmas jazz died instantly. Richard, the consummate performer, forced a smile. "Eleanor, darling, you must be freezing. Charlotte, get my mother a warming drink." "I am not cold, Richard," Eleanor said, her voice a low, precise cut. "But Vivian was." She stepped aside, revealing me standing in the hallway entrance. The color drained completely from Charlotte's face. Tiffany clutched my laptop tighter. Richard's expression was one of profound irritation. "Vivian," he sighed, shaking his head with mock disappointment. "I see you ran straight to your grandmother. Always the victim, aren't you? I told you, Mother. She was having a childish fit over some business criticism. I was just about to go look for her." "You were pouring a scotch," I said, my voice steady, betraying no fear. "And you locked the deadbolt." "Technicalities," Richard dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Protecting the pipes." Eleanor turned to Mr. Davies, the lawyer, who stepped forward holding the briefcase. "Mr. Davies, is the precise timeline of events secured?" "Affirmative, madam," Davies replied, his tone flat and professionally lethal. "We have the gate security logs, thermal imaging, and a confirmed timestamp of the lockout. 47 minutes of documented exposure. In most jurisdictions, that is criminal endangerment. In this family, it is a catastrophic breach of contract." Richard offered a thin, nervous laugh. "Contract? This is my house. I discipline my daughter as I see fit." "That," Eleanor said with chilling authority, "is where you are catastrophically mistaken." Davies placed the briefcase on the coffee table. The twin latches snapped open. "You don't own this house, Richard," Eleanor said softly. "You never did." Richard's arrogance finally dissolved. "I have the deed. You signed it over 10 years ago. It's in the safe." "You possess a piece of paper," Eleanor corrected. "A highly controlled fraud that I allowed you to hold to maintain your predictability. The ink on the true document dried 26 years ago, at 12:01 a.m. on your 32nd birthday." She pulled a thick, bound document from the briefcase and dropped it onto the table. "Read the beneficiary line, Richard. Read the final clause." He picked it up, his hands shaking violently. I watched his eyes scan the legal text, watching the exact moment the foundation of his entire world evaporated. This states," he stammered. "It says the estate, the land, and the controlling interest in Sterling Holdings were placed in a blind, irrevocable trust, to be transferred in full to the first female heir upon her 25th birthday," Eleanor finished, looking at me. "Happy birthday, Vivian." The document was executed precisely at midnight. The room tilted. I looked at my father. I no longer saw the tyrant who dictated my life. I saw a helpless squatter. "You," Richard whispered, venom returning. "You knew. You planned this manipulation." "I knew nothing," I said, the truth rushing through me. "I thought I was ruined. I thought I was homeless." "She is a failure," Charlotte screeched, standing up. "She crashed her company. She cannot run an estate." "She was not a failure," Eleanor said coldly. "She was deliberately sabotaged. We tracked the short selling. Richard used his corporate leverage to strategically break her company, ensuring she would have no choice but to return home. He needed her here because he knew this day was coming." She stepped toward him. "You broke her leg so you could offer her a crutch, and then you viciously kicked the crutch away in a blizzard." "I raised her," Richard bellowed. "This is my home." "This is not your home, Mr. Harrison," Davies interjected. "As of midnight, you are legally trespassing." "I am her father." "Biologically?" "Yes," I said, walking toward Tiffany. I reached down and pulled the laptop from her hands. She offered no resistance. "But legally, you are merely a liability I have inherited." I looked at the document. My name was there. It was freedom, power, and capital. "What are your immediate instructions, Miss Harrison?" Davies asked. He was asking me. I looked at Richard. I saw him preparing his final desperate plea. I want them removed, I said. Now? Davies asked. The blizzard is intensifying, Charlotte wailed. You can't throw us out in this weather. I looked at the window, at the spot where I had been shaking uncontrollably. I felt the comforting weight of the cashmere. I don't want them out tomorrow, I said, my voice dropping to a low, cold whisper that commanded the room. I want them out now, and I want everything they possess, jewelry, phones, wallets, left behind. They leave with only the clothes they are wearing, nothing else. Eleanor Sterling smiled, a magnificent, terrifying sight. You heard the owner, she said to the security team. Clear the building. Zero tolerance for resistance. Wait, Richard lunged forward. Vivian, listen, I was just trying to make you tough. You succeeded, I said. The security guards moved instantly. They grabbed Richard by his jacket. He screamed and struggled as they dragged him toward the door. Charlotte shrieked. The front door opened. The wind howled, a hungry vortex. I watched my father being shoved out into the snowdrift where I had been standing. He fell hard to his knees. He looked back at the house, at the warmth, at the light. Vivian, he screamed. Open the door. I walked to the panoramic window. I placed my hand against the cold glass. I looked him directly in the eye, and then I reached for the heavy velvet drawcord. Demolish, I whispered, repeating the word that had started it all. I pulled the cord. The thick, insulating drapes slid shut, instantly blotting out the sight of him, sealing the warmth inside, and leaving him abandoned in the cold, desolate world he had built for me. The room fell silent. Well, Eleanor said, pouring a glass of scotch for herself and one for me. That, Vivian, is how you execute a successful hostile takeover. She handed me the crystal tumbler. Welcome home.